Hello my dear friends, welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about some new to me authors that I discovered last year that impressed me so deeply that I can't wait to explore their backlist. So I feel like there were some authors that I tried last year in 2025 that even if I liked the book okay, I could tell that their writing style or their grasp on the craft wasn't something that would be like, I have got to read more from this author. But then I had these authors, so I have 15 of them that I read last year that I was like, I need to read more from this author. I don't really know that there's anything that would make me not excited about one of these books that an author would have upcoming. And a lot of them, it was sort of like, I read one book and I was like, this is an author that I want to explore more from. This is an author I want to keep my eye out for when they have a new release coming, because that's how impressive their writing and their grip on writing as a craft is to me. So let's go ahead and get started. Some of these are going to overlap a little, not a lot, with my best books of the year video that I just put out. And you may be able to guess who the first author is because I really talked about her a lot in that video, and it is Eda Pierce. Eda Pierce is a sci-fi monster romance author, and she is absolutely phenomenal. This is an author that has such a good, solid understanding of the writing craft that she is able to make her prose feel invisible in sometimes, and in other times she uses her words just exactly the right way to create just the right amount of tension drawn to it to make you think a little bit deeper about what she's writing. And I think that this is actually a very underrated skill that a lot of monster romance and sci-fi romance authors have. I think that too often they are maybe pushed to the side because they do write like different anatomy and sci-fi romance and monster romance, things like that. I think they are some of the best authors as far as writing craft goes. I think they're extremely skilled, extremely talented. Their writing craft is honed very, very well, and that is for sure this author. Like, her story just flows. She really understands both writing craft and storytelling, which are two separate skills, and I think that it really works just exceptionally well. So she's an author that I absolutely need to read more from this year. She really wowed me last year, and yeah, I'm kind of ashamed that I haven't continued on with that, but fantastic, fantastic. So another author is a contemporary romance author. So this one was a really fun surprise. It is Ivy Fairbanks, who wrote Morbidly Yours, which was the book that I read last year. And this author really impressed me with how she was able to blend sort of this melancholy, grief type of death, things that we don't really like talking about and that oftentimes we don't even want to associate with romance. Specifically not like a rom-com, right? Like that, I feel like that's kind of something that most readers don't want, and I don't really, if I'm looking for a rom-com, I don't really want a lot of like death in there, right? But I do feel like this author really had a good handle on balancing that, like the levity in here. It didn't feel like there were too many abrupt tonal shifts. I feel like she really kind of handled that with a lot of care, guiding you through the sequences that were about death and that were about grief, and getting you to the romance and the heart of it and the rom-com moments. Like, I was very, very impressed with her handling of both her subject matter, her romantic development, and just the way that she wrote her prose on the page. Like, I was very impressed with this author, and I definitely want to read more from her. So anyway, as I'm talking about these authors, all of the books that I mentioned are books that I recommend, so take that as you will. So now this next author is not a new author. She's actually quite an old school author, but I have got to include her because I was not prepared for her game. Like, seriously, I don't know why, because she is a legend in historical romance. I'm talking about Judith McNaught, but I still was not prepared for how skilled and deft her writing craft was. And I think that is possibly because I have read in like the last few years, I have read some old school historical romance authors specifically, where I feel like their writing craft is not up to par. Their writing skills are not up to par for how popular they were even back at the time. I'm thinking of one author in particular, and I am going to go ahead and say it's Jude Deveraux. Her Velvet series specifically may have a lot of sentimental value or nostalgic value for people who loved and read it when they came out. I read Jude Deveraux. She was like my first historical romance author that I read. But when I went back to read them recently, within the last few years, I was really astounded at, quite honestly, how poor the writing quality was. Like, I was a little shocked with that. So I think that that experience and a few other authors that I have read that are people's favorites that are like old school like that, I really wasn't prepared for the immense talent that Judith McNaught had. Like, her writing is so incredibly fresh. Her dialogue is fantastic. She has good banter. She has great characters that she creates these interesting scenarios in that don't feel like they're completely bonkers, but also don't feel like they're too mundane. Like, she has a really good handle on providing moments that let the characters kind of breathe and settle into a normal life. And then she also has moments of high drama and things like that that make it very compelling. I mean, the best thing I can say about her writing is it's very witty, it's very sharp, it's very sparkling, like, it just feels incredibly fresh. So that's an author that I read 2 books from her last year, loved both of them, and I can't wait to read more from her. Like, she is phenomenal, just extremely, extremely good. Okay, so now this next one was a bit of a surprise as far as I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I got this recommendation from Sarah McLean a couple of years ago, and it is Louisa Darling, who is not a new author, but she is newer to historical romance. I think she has 3 full books and a novella out. She is incredibly talented, a very gifted writer. Again, she has very sparkling, witty, sharp, fun. Not necessarily sharp, I don't know if that's the right word, but what I mean by that is just like honed to perfection, not necessarily like biting type of sharp, you know? Like quick, sharp type of thing like that, where you can tell like this is someone who deeply understands the craft, knows how to tell a story, knows how to get her words across and get you in there like quickly, and I just adore her. I really, really think she wowed me with her writing, and that, I mean, I loved her romances, I loved her stories, but if the writing is weak, I'm not gonna want to continue with that author. Like, it's a huge stumbling block for me. Okay, so now the next author is another historical romance author, and one that I was very impressed with, and that is Rose Lerner. Now, I really enjoyed this book, Sweet Disorder, but I did not love it enough to put it on my top books of the year. It was just like 4.5, not quite to a 5-star. But the thing about this author that I really love is that she creates characters who are atypical. Her heroine is a plus-size heroine in this book, but she is so deeply desired by every man that she meets. And I mean, a lot of authors do that, right? That's not really recommending just her writing. But the way that this author tells that experience, where the heroine is struggling with feeling not necessarily at home or comfortable in her body, even while she acknowledges the power that she has over men and how much they desire her, her discomfort comes from comments from her mother and how her mother has made her feel. And then she goes out into the world and she is actively seeing that actually men really want and desire her. And also, I have to say, like, it's not just about her body and her looks. Like, she writes a very intelligent character. This heroine is extremely intelligent, but she's also had sorrow and struggle. And again, this is another author who handles that blend of life's trials and struggles and despair with levity and romance and brightness. And that's got to be like a really good balance for me. I like to see both of those, like moments of high love, romance, happiness, but I like to see a little bit of despair too, because I think that juxtaposition creates a really satisfying story experience for me personally. Okay, so now this next author is a YA author actually, and she writes YA fantasy, and I do think that, you know, when YA was kind of booming in like the late 2010s, maybe early 2010s, you know, the standard of quality for good writing in YA to get published, because indie publishing wasn't really a thing. It was like YA was driving the book market at that time, you remember? I don't know if you remember that. And so to be a published author, YA author, your standard of quality for good writing had to be really high. And I think that is doubly because you're writing towards young readers who are not going to tolerate, you know, like they're just simply not going to read something that is hard for them to get through if they're stumbling over, like if the author is struggling to make their point, if their grammar or anything, like things that make writing invisible, if that is not strong, the youth, they're not gonna read it. They're gonna just know. So something that I think by default creates strong writers is typically the genre that they're in. And I think YA is one of those that really produces powerfully strong, clear writers that I just really love. So this book is A Cruel Thirst. This was a vampire romance fantasy, and I was very impressed with both how she handled the characters, the mythology. I loved all of that, but I also just feel like her writing was very effortless to get into. There were parts that were beautiful, but it wasn't drawing attention to the beauty of the words. So she was fantastic. I would definitely read more from her based off of just her writing alone. I did really enjoy that book as well. I think I gave it I think I may have gave it 5 stars. I really liked it. Okay, now this one is one that I kind of struggled with because I read this book. It's a historical romance author. It is Emily Larkin, who wrote Unmasking Miss Appleby. So this is a historical romance with just a hint of magic in it. These are sort of like fairy tales, kind of. There's a fairy godmother in here who is definitely like the dark side of fairy, like that type of fae, and she presents the heroines in each book in the series with like a wish or response to one of their wishes, but there's always a heavy cost to it, right? Like it's not just return by midnight or you turn into a beggar girl again like Cinderella, you know, like there's a heavy cost if they don't wish for the right thing. So this whole series is really interesting and really unique, and I was very excited to read this, and I do think that this author is a really strong writer. Like, her writing is very solid. She has a good grasp of prose and how that moves the story. She really understands how to write characters. Sometimes they do things that I don't feel like are necessarily the most interesting thing, but I think that she does have a good way of fleshing her characters out. I did enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars. I continued on with the series. The second book I didn't like at all, and then I kind of stopped. But I want to go back and continue because the first book was really solid. It was very solid, really showed that she knows what she's doing with writing. She knows how to create an interesting story, but I don't know that her storytelling abilities are that strong from what I've seen so far. I would have to read more, but I did enjoy the first one. Very unique concept, and I would recommend her for sure. I think that she was a really fun, underrated author, specifically if you're looking for a different historical romance author with just a hint of magic, and maybe you don't want to go fully into like a romantasy type of thing. Okay, so now this next one is an excellent one, and this is Stella Riley. She wrote The Mesalliance. So this came from a recommendation from Erin, who I follow on Instagram. She has great recommendations, great taste. If you're looking for an Instagrammer to follow, you should definitely follow her. I had never heard of this author. I had never seen this before. The cover I think is absolutely stunning. These are set in Georgian times, which is sort of unique in and of itself. That's not something that you see a whole lot in historical romance. But I think that the cover kind of gave me the idea that this was going to be a little bit, maybe a little bit stilted, or I was going to be kept at a distance from the writing. So I was really surprised to get into this and see that the writing is full of warmth, that you really get to feel the characters right away, and that there is sort of almost a Georgette Heyer quality to her writing here that has those moments of like propriety, but also has moments of warmth and humor and really great romance in here and really great characterization. So this is an author that I absolutely want to read more from. This book almost made my top books of 2025, but I had a few others that I just felt a little bit more deeply about. But still, this is an author that really is worth checking out. She's really excellent, very skilled, and I really like how she develops her romances for sure. Okay, so now this next author is a romantasy author, and it is Lauren Palreyman, who wrote The Wolf King. I read this book and I was instantly captivated. Like, this is the type of book that got me into the story like right away. And I did listen to the audio of these, so I do think the audio narrator's performance had something to do with that, but I also feel like it's just the author's way of telling a story that gets you hooked right away, gets you invested in the characters, and then does a really good job of getting you to the rest of the way. So I will say that this is maybe not the best prose on this list for sure, but it is serviceable in the way that it allows you to get into the story and just focus on the characters. And this was just one of the funnest reads that I had last year. I really enjoyed it. She writes a great protective hero, and she really builds tension in the romances excellently. So I did read the duet that is out, The Wolf King, and then I think the next one is The Night Prince, and I enjoyed them both. So I thought that she was definitely a standout author for me. Okay, now the next one is Julie Olivia, who wrote If It Makes You Happy. So this is a throwback to the 90s contemporary romance, and I have to say that this is another author who really has a good grasp on blending moments that feel very melancholy and sad, even if I do feel like this author kinds to dwell there a little bit, just a touch too long for my taste, and that's saying from someone who likes a healthy dose of melancholy with romantic, triumphant, happy moments in there overpowering it. I think that there were some moments in here that seemed like we were languishing just a little too long, because the heroine in here, you know, she's going through a divorce, her husband has said some cruel things to her, so she's really dealing with a lot of internal self-destructive thoughts and feeling like she's kind of worthless because of what her husband let her know and everything that happened there. So that can feel a little bit heavy. But the moments in here that sort of pull her out of that are her discovering who she is, trying to learn how to bake, trying to run this inn, falling in love with the baker. Like, those were very sparkling and very beautiful, and started off kind of quiet and then pulled it out to a beautiful end. And I will say that she has an excellent command on the craft of writing. Her prose really flows. It doesn't draw attention to itself, but it really suits the feeling and the vibe that she's going for in this book. Okay, so now this next one is another one that I felt like was just a really excellent writer. It is Stephanie Fischer, who wrote Shardless. Shardless was a fantasy romance that I read last year on the recommendation of a patron, Benet, and I enjoyed it so much. It was so fun. I think that this feels similar in a good way to ACOTAR. If you like A Court of Thorns and Roses or Throne of Glass, this is probably going to work for you really well, but I will say this feels a little bit elevated in the way that she handles some of the relationships that feel like they are friends to lovers in here. I also will say that I really enjoyed the magic and the world building in here. It seemed really well thought out, very well crafted. And again, this is the sort of prose that is invisible, that just gets you into the story and lets you just get swept away without drawing attention to itself and without hanging you up on things that feel like flaws or errors. Like, I really enjoyed this a lot. Okay, so now this next one was just an absolute delight. This is another one we read for Patreon. It is Sangu Mandanna, who wrote The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. I really wasn't sure what to expect with this one other than I knew it was cozy. I was worried that the hype was going to overshadow it, but I have to say that I loved this book and I loved this author's writing style. Something that she does that I really, really appreciate is that she zeroes in on small, what seems to be inconsequential moments between characters, or just a character alone with something when they're kind of having an introspective moment and they're realizing things that pushes them to make the decision that drives the story forward. She handles those with so much care. She doesn't necessarily linger in areas like that for an overly long time. She just has just the right amount of time to show you this is a catalyst moment in this character's life that's going to propel them to the next moment in their story and in their journey. And I love and adore that so freaking much. So I was very impressed with this. Okay, now the next one is Martha Keyes, who is a historical romance writer, and this again is a recommendation from Erin on Instagram, who is also a patron, but it is Of Lands High and Low. So this book is a pretty heavy one. It deals with some, I think it's smallpox as an outbreak. There is a good amount of suffering and death. But the thing that really wowed me with this was how the smaller moments of joy and hopefulness and love, to me, were so powerful. And I think that that can be a really tricky thing to do, especially if you're in a book that is excessively or that is very heavy. Having those shining moments are the thing that's going to carry you through to the end. So how can an author create those moments without making it feel like a tonal shift that is too hard, right? And I think that that really comes to like using a dimmer switch with your writing. So you're in a really dark area and you just have to have this moment that is going to be emotionally powerful, but if you switch it all the way up to bright, it's going to not be as satisfying as if you kind of gradually get there. And then when it starts shining, you realize that every dark moment in that book was worth it to get to that final illuminating moment. And that's exactly how I feel about this book and Martha Keyes. Like, it was so beautifully powerful. And while the moments of light in this book were fewer, in my opinion, than the heavy moments, they absolutely made the whole journey worth it. It was deeply powerful and moving. And that's the kind of book that I personally really love to read. So she's an author that I am definitely going to be checking out more of in the future. Okay, and then I have two more authors on this list. So I have Morgan Elizabeth, who wrote some of the Christmas romances I read in December. I was so impressed with this author. Like, I really love her writing style. It feels very conversational. It gets you right into the story, makes you feel like the characters are your girlfriends you're just hanging out with. You're kind of rooting for them. You kind of get upset when they have troubles with their boyfriends, you know, like just the type of writing that makes you feel like you're sitting with a bunch of friends, that is very effortless, that is very fun, and I just loved it. Like, I ate up at least 3 of her books in December just because I was having so much fun and really vibing with her writing style. So I really like that a lot. She was just a great, honestly, I feel like she would be a really good comfort read author if that's the type of thing that you like, because it makes it just feel like someone else has seen experiences that maybe you have had and you feel like one of the girls, and it's just a great thing. Then the last author I have on this list was one of the last books that I read last year that did make it to my top books of 2025, and it is Kai Stevens, who wrote Blue Willow. I was so incredibly impressed with this book. It is full of such beautiful, shining moments without leaving out a lot of the characters' struggles. Like, I personally feel like we need to see a little bit more of a good balance of the characters struggling and then they're happily ever after, right? Like, I need to see my characters work through some things, especially in a romance, especially when there are stakes involved and they're trying to overcome some things like some personal trauma or whatever. I want to see that journey, because otherwise I just simply don't care. I don't feel invested in the character. I don't care that they're living happily for 100 pages in the book. I want to see them transform and change and get there. That's what I'm reading fiction for, is the transformation of this fictional character. So this author had all of that. She also had a really effective use of description in here that is very sensory and makes you really feel the setting, which is sort of like a third character in this book. I loved this author's writing. I was deeply impressed, and I cannot wait to read more from her, because she's got a ton of talent and she really knows how to not necessarily manipulate. I mean, all authors are manipulating your emotions, but she knows how to play them in a way that is very satisfying. So I enjoyed that one a lot. I can't wait to read more from her. So there you have it. That is my list of my favorite new to me authors that I discovered last year. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please let me know down below if you have a new author that you think is worth checking out. I would love to know that. And if you just want to let me know that you were here, please leave me a pink heart, and I will see you all in my next video.